Welcome back to Coffee at Wynns. Today we're delighted to be joined by Jim Culleton. Jim is the artistic director at Fishamble, the new theatre company. Jim has directed many numerous and prestigious plays in his time over the 32 years he spent with the company. They've toured across the globe, including the UK, Europe, the US, Canada, New Zealand and Australia. Fishamble have received numerous awards, including an Olivier Award in 2016 for Silent. They've received the Stage Awards, Scotch Friends First Awards, and most recently Jim was awarded Irish Times Theatre Director of the Year for 2020. Jim, it's an absolute pleasure to have you. Thank you for taking the time to do the interview.
Thanks very much, Jack. Lovely to be here.
I think to begin, if we could, before we kind of get on to the origins of Fishamble itself, could you tell us a little bit about your own background and how you got into the theatre in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose I just always loved drama. My parents sent me to drama classes when I was 6 or 7, and I just really took to it, in the way that children just take to certain things, So I went to drama classes growing up, and I went to classes at Betty Ann Norton's drama school, and I suppose, from the time I was about 8 or 9, then I got a few parts in things. So, I had some parts in RTE radio drama for a few years. I was the kind of the resident boy in various radio plays there. That was fantastic, seeing the RTE ensemble of actors and how they worked, And so I would go in like every couple of weeks. They'd need a boy in a radio play, and I'd pop in and take a couple of hours off school and I went to school up in Belvedere here, very near here, and I'd pop in and and do a radio play. And then after a few years of that, and it was great fun, I got a call and the producer said, "Oh, has your voice broken, Jim?" And I was like, "Oh no, not at all. I don't know what you're talking about." So I had to put that part of my career away for a while. But then I was also, I was in some films and TV programs, having a really great time growing up, doing lots of that. There was a TV series about the life of Sean O'Casey. John Kavanagh played Sean O'Casey, and I played him when he was a boy. And then there was another film for TV called The Manions of America. I was Pierce Brosnan's brother in that, and I'm sure he's there somewhere telling people that I was his brother as well, no doubt.
No doubt.
And then, and a fantastic little Neil Jordan film that Pat O'Connor directed called Night in Tunisia. So kind of doing that, and then I suppose I just kind of just stayed really interested in it, being part of the National Youth Theatre back in the late 80s. With great people that I still know today, like Aidan Gillen and the late Tom Murphy and Richard Cooper and lots of fantastic people in that, Brenda Donoghue, and then making friends with people. And then I went to Trinity then and did a degree in drama and English. So I suppose I've always been really keen on it and wanted to do that,
And at what point then did you realise that your interest kind of lay more kind of behind the scenes, producing and creating productions rather than kind of front and centre stage?
Yeah, I think when you're growing up maybe and you're into theatre, maybe you think about acting as the main thing that you might be interested in doing. And then going to Trinity certainly and studying drama was a real eye-opener, because suddenly I was in Players, very involved in the Student Drama Society there and in the drama department obviously as well. And you're stage managing shows and you're selling tickets and you're out sort of giving out flyers for the shows and you're doing the lights or the sound for the shows. And you just kind of see all the kind of the other jobs that are available really, and that make up the sort of the theatre collaboration. And it's such a collaborative art form, which I love about it. It involves so many people. And I suppose during college then I got more involved in directing some shows and really loved that. And started, got more involved in that. And then there were a few times when, I was going to be in a play, and then I was also going to direct a play or asked to do both, and the two things clashed. And I found myself usually choosing the directing option, I suppose, and maybe being more drawn to that. And I kind of love being involved in all the aspects of things, like working with designers, like set and costume and lighting and sound and video designers is a really fun and rewarding part of the job. So I kind of love getting involved in all those aspects. Maybe, and also I think maybe, as an actor, I think people nowadays kind of see, a lot of actors see themselves as theatre makers, and they create their own work, and that's really impressive and inspirational to see that. I think when I was starting off in theatre, that wasn't quite the case. I mean, there was a sense that as an actor, you kind of waited for a director to offer you a job or to ask you to audition, and I kind of felt like I didn't quite like the lack of control that an actor has. So I kind of enjoyed that you could, as a director, you could decide to do something, you could persuade people to give you the theatre, you could try and get the money from someone, get a group of people together and get it on. You had a bit more control over that, or a bit more of an ability to do that. And things have changed, I think, now, which is good. But at the time, I kind of certainly enjoyed the ability to make things happen that a director had, maybe more than an actor.
Yeah, and not to segue away from kind of the story too much, but what do you think has helped that shift away from kind of, as you said, actors being kind of waiting for a director to give them a call, to saying, no, I'm going to create my own work and I'm more than capable of doing so? What do you think has helped that?
I think it's a few things. I think partly people just get frustrated because if you feel out of control of things, or you feel that you can't generate work for yourself, that people feel frustrated that they want to make their own work, and that's a great motivation, I suppose, that you feel, well, I'm just going to do it myself. And I think the kind of the formal training as well that has really taken off in Ireland in the past 25 years, since I left college, has really helped that as well. I mean, there's fantastic work in the drama department in Trinity, in the Lear, in the Gaiety School of Acting, lots of full-time drama courses where people are really encouraged and trained to think of themselves as theatre makers, as the creators of work, as creative artists rather than interpretive artists, which maybe had been the case in the past a bit more. So I think there's been a kind of a sense of actors seeing themselves in that light more and more, but mostly through necessity, that if you want to make a go of it, it's a precarious profession, and you need to be able to make work yourself, and you need to be able to collaborate with people and with your peers or whatever, especially starting off, and make the work together, because it's quite likely that people aren't going to offer you the work, that you're going to have to make it happen for yourself. I think it's mostly that drives people.
And then I suppose to come back, so Fishamble then, talk to me about the origins. I know it was Pig's Back originally when it began.
That's right, yeah.
Talk to me about that journey at the initial stages.
Yeah, sure. So in 1988, we were all students in Trinity, in Players there, and also in Dramsoc in UCD. And there was a big group of us, maybe about a dozen of us, that were kind of involved in the Irish Student Drama Association Festival every year, going to, doing the kind of a couple of shows representing each drama society. And we just got on really well and really enjoyed working with each other. And there were a few people in that first group, like people like Fergus Linehan, who now runs the Edinburgh International Festival, and Ed Guiney, who runs Element Pictures. And so, some people kind of really making their mark, kind of in different fields. So there's a big group of us that just decided, why don't we put on some shows over the summer? There was a recession in the late 80s in Ireland anyway. It wasn't like there were many jobs around. And we thought, well, if we're going to be poor, let's be poor doing what we love, and let's put on some plays. And we put on some plays in the summer for a few years and really enjoyed that. And we kind of formed a company then called Pig's Back. And then we kind of left college, and I suppose the number dwindled because some people wanted to stay committed and some people kind of headed off to do other things, and ultimately myself and two actors, Paul Hickey and Kathy Downs, kind of stayed with it for a few years, and then Maureen Kennelly, who's now the director of the Arts Council, came in as our general manager and producer, and I suppose, and then we sort of, it grew a little bit, and then there was kind of another shift when Paul and Kathy left it, and we changed our name then to Fishamble in 1996. And I suppose asserted our commitment to new plays, and became the New Play Company, and the only company in Ireland dedicated exclusively to new plays. Other companies do new plays, of course, as well, but as part of a program of other work. So we're the only ones doing it just exclusively and on its own. And I suppose we've been committed to that since then, really, And
that must have been a brave decision to make at the time, considering obviously the success of the more established plays in this country and the reputation that certain plays have and their iterations over decades. And talk to me about making that decision and having the kind of guts to make so early on in the kind of the whole process of Fishamble.
Yeah, I think there is, as you say, there's a huge tradition of writers and writing and theatre and playwriting, particularly in Ireland. And you think of so many famous playwrights, right back to Goldsmith and Sheridan and Oscar Wilde, and then Yeats and O'Casey and Lady Gregory and Teresa Deevy, and then you think of Beckett and Behan, and up to modern writers. We have a huge tradition and wealth of writing here, and when you tour abroad, you think, gosh, people really do know Ireland through our writers and through our theatre and through our arts. So for a small country, we really make an impact, I think, culturally and artistically. So we're sort of proud of that, but I kind of felt we wanted to sort of carry on that tradition and see what contemporary writers would write, and wanted to sort of see what we could say that was new rather than investigating plays that already existed. And I suppose we came out of college and we felt there were a lot of our peers, that were just like, people like Marina Carr and Michael West and Deirdre Hines were all kind of involved in those early years and some of the work we were doing, and Joe O'Connor. So we kind of felt that that our peers and people our age had something to say and could use theatre to say something, and that we would just put our faith in our own voices and what we had to say ourselves. So that was kind of how we started, and that kind of went well for us and really kind of became something that we were then known for and had a reputation for, and we've evolved and developed as the years went on. The little tagline, the new play company that you mentioned earlier, like is very simple in a way, and yet kind of took us years to come up with like all these very simple things. But that was something we kind of, maybe about 10, 15 years ago, we started thinking about how we could use our resources and our infrastructure as a company with the funding and backing of the Arts Council and Dublin City Council and Culture Ireland to just sort of help create new work and new plays and beyond our own repertoire, so producing work ourselves, but also running workshops, running playwriting courses, being involved in all kinds of schemes and initiatives to help young writers, collaborating with people like Dublin Fringe Festival and the Irish Theatre Institute to run schemes, and trying to just kind of like, I suppose, be a kind of a resource for people putting on new plays and developing new plays beyond our own work, as well as our own productions, being at the centre of all those things. So we kind of got more and more into just seeing how we could expand our I suppose our influence, but also our service to the theatre community through that. And so at the moment, each year we're responsible for supporting and helping the writers of over half the plays produced on the island of Ireland each year. So there are a lot of initiatives going, I suppose, that help feed into the development of playwriting and the production of new plays in Ireland, which has all kind of grown from that very early decision to commit ourselves to new plays, but has kind of grown and become something bigger, I suppose, as the years go on.
Absolutely. I want to touch on that later on. I want to touch a bit those aspects of it. But initially, I suppose then, what sort of, we've kind of spoken about it already, but what criteria then would make a production a Fishamble production?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think I think in a way we're committed to new plays. With the new play company, everything we do is new, everything is original. It means everything is risky. So like we're not like a kind of we don't have a theatre space. We move around, and there are good things and bad things about that. So I think it's like a theatre space, like the Abbey is just here beside us. Or the gate up the road, or the project just across the river. Those kind of theatres they're a building, people know where the building is, they always go to a play in the same building. You can kind of say, you liked our last play, you'll probably like our next one, maybe not, but you have a good sense of it. With Fishamble, you don't have that. We don't have that sense of being in the one place all the time, doing a similar scale of work, because we can do plays that transfer to the West End, or that are in big theatres, or we can do plays that are on tour on the islands off the coast of Cork, in the West Cork Fish Up Festival or whatever. Like we can be in parish halls with 20 or 30 people in the audience, or we can be in the Everyman in Cork with 650 people in the audience or whatever. And so the work kind of changes scale based on that, and I kind of love that about it. So we try not to tie ourselves down too much and say we do one type of thing, apart from the fact that it's new work. It's work that we find exciting. I suppose we hope to put on plays that have an urgency, or that demand to be produced. Plays that have something to say about the world we live in, that grapple with the world we're experiencing, and help us understand ourselves and the world we're in, and wrestle with those kind of issues. I mean, they're the kind of plays we're drawn to. But that's kind of wide in a way.
Yeah.
I think in terms of what makes a Fishamble play, I think we probably are drawn to plays about people on the fringes of society, the underdog, people that maybe, that like allowing the audience to, I suppose, enter the world of somebody else and put themselves in somebody else's shoes for a while, and leave the theatre seeing the world a bit differently. That's the ultimate hope, I suppose, that someone leaves the theatre after an hour and a half or whatever, and goes out and sees the world a bit differently to when they had come in. And if you've achieved that, that feels very special. Certainly. I remember we were working with Sebastian Barry on a play a few years back called The Pride of Parnell Street, and he kind of said that there was a character in it who was a drug addict and a thief and a murderer, and Sebastian said, he's like a kind of guy that might be sitting at the side of the street that you would cross the road to avoid, but after spending an hour and a half with him in the theatre, you feel like you've got to know him, you've got to know somebody you would never meet in real life, and that can be part of what theatre does. And I think we're drawn to those kinds of plays in Fishamble, the plays that give you a different perspective on life, that are often about the underdog, that have an element of social justice perhaps, but also have a theatricality about them, and feel that they really have to happen in a theatre, rather that you couldn't sort of see it on TV or anywhere else. That there's a sort of a theatrical imagination at work, I suppose, in the plays.
And then from your own perspective, I suppose, before we go on to kind of discuss the social justice element of your work, how much of a challenge is it to you then? Because we are creatures of habit, that you don't, you go on to a successful formula. Silent, for example, is a good iteration of that. You have huge success. How do you then find your own personal challenge to keep your ideas organic, to kind of stay committed to the values that have made Fishamble what it is?
Yeah, I think there are certain elements that we stay committed to. Like we want to produce work that that employs artists to do really good quality work and that really connects and engages with audiences, and work that is vibrant and urgent and feels compelling to watch. But I think we also like the variety, and we'd like to never repeat ourselves or to try not to repeat ourselves. So certainly it can be a challenge when something is very successful. Like Silent, you mentioned, there is a play by Pat Kinnavan that it's actually celebrating its 10th anniversary at the moment. We started off in 2011 with that play, and as you mentioned, it won an Olivier Award in London, and it's been touring. It's toured to hundreds of venues and theatres and art centres all over Ireland and all over the world, and had enormous success. And we've just, with some support from Culture Ireland, actually, we've just filmed that. We're going to release that soon with a number of partners nationally and internationally. So that's a great success, and then Pat, and myself kind of sat down and thought, well, what will we do next? And think, well, let's not do something like that. Let's bring the audience with us. Like, let's hope we hang on to that audience and that they will follow us and be loyal to us, which thankfully they seem to have been. But let's give them something very different. So the next play by Pat was a play called Underneath, where he wasn't playing, a man, a similar age to himself. He was playing a woman who was underneath the ground, and had been buried there, was speaking from under the grave, and so his whole body is painted in black and gold. She's like kind of an Egyptian pharaoh underneath the ground. And then we followed that up with another play called Before, which is a musical, a play with songs. We have the RTE Concert Orchestra perform the music for us, written by Dennis Clohessy. It's set in Cleary's, just around the corner, on the day that Cleary's shuts. And so that again is very different to what we've done with Pat before. So we try to always, move on and progress and push ourselves and challenge ourselves. But you hope that the success of the body of work and the success of previous plays will certainly reassure audiences that while they don't know what they're going to get, they've never seen it before, it's a new play, it's original, it's risky, that they also feel that they reassured that they hopefully are usually happy they went to a Fishamble production and rewarded by the experience.
And you mentioned audiences. That's certainly something I want to discuss with you. An Irish audience in particular. Do you think that they were open to this idea that, as you mentioned, there's a body of work, but it's an incredibly diverse body of work? Did it take time for kind of cultural attitudes to shift, that people were more open to these? I'm going into production, it could be entirely different to what I went to see in Fishamble last time, whereas the more traditional Irish theatre goer who goes to the Abbey, and you kind of mentioned earlier, they're experiencing a similar, let's say, production each time that they're going. How do you think that the appetites in the Irish theatre audience have changed in that regard?
I think theatre audiences around the world, and certainly in Ireland as much as anywhere else, if not more so, are really curious, engaged, interested kind of people that like to rather than sort of sit at home. We've all been doing that for the last year, obviously, watching TV, and glad to have it. But in general, in normal times, people that like to get out, to be in, like people who want to go into a theatre and be in a dark room with strangers and pay their money before they know what they're going to get, and allow themselves to suspend their disbelief and believe what they see on stage is real, and enter into a world on the stage in front of them. They're kind of adventurous, curious, open-minded, engaged people, So theatre audiences are fantastic, and they will go with you. Like, in a way, you can stand on stage and say, "Here I am standing on the moon," and no one really is going to stand up and say, "No, you're not. You're in a theatre." People will go, "Yeah, okay, you're on the moon." I'll go with that. Audiences are open to going with whatever premise you set up, and if you honour that, and if you respect that, and if you bring them with integrity through a journey of some sort, they will really go with you. And audiences are very loyal, I think, to Fishamble's work. We also, because we tour so much, like we apart not in non-pandemic times, we tour to usually about 45 or 50 theatres in Ireland, and then we've toured to 19 other countries. We're kind of touring internationally as well with Arts Council and Culture Ireland support. So we work a lot with venues and with theatres and art centres, and there's a wonderful network around the country. I mean, that was one of the things that the Celtic Tiger, I think, gave us, was a real network of beautiful art centres around the country that engage with their audiences in very meaningful ways. So you benefit from that partnership, and the festivals we work with as well. We work with a lot of a lot of festivals like, Galway International Arts Festival, Dublin Theatre Festival, Dublin Fringe Festival, Belfast International Festival, lots of festivals all around the country, the Cork West Fit Up Festival, lots of festivals that we're part of where they're building up an audience as well. So you benefit from those partnerships because everyone has their audience and their following, really,
And then you touched on it there. Obviously, you've toured 90 different countries. That poses kind of cultural differences, but also linguistically, you've put on productions in places like the Czech Republic, Bulgaria. Talk to me about that challenge, and then also the kind of the differing attitudes, if there are, of theatre audiences in different parts of the world.
Yeah, I think people do have different attitudes and different expectations in different parts of the world. But what you actually feel and realise as you tour around the world, and are lucky enough to do so when we tour internationally, is that there's a shared humanity no matter where you are in the world. So people will feel sorry for the woman who's having a rough time in her life. They will laugh at the guy who does something foolish. Like there's a kind of a real shared sense of empathy and humanity, no matter where you are in the world. So what's really startling sometimes is actually how similar people's reactions are to things. And I think we were like when we're in the Czech Republic or Bulgaria, Romania, and Serbia, those kinds of places, as you said, there are subtitles, and the subtitles in some countries are in Cyrillic text. They're not even in an alphabet that you'd really recognise. If you're an English speaker. So it's kind of amazing to see audiences kind of follow that. We were in Germany once, and there was a simultaneous translation with the guy translating, and he was saying that the Irish people speak very quickly, and the characters in the play were speaking quickly, and that words in German also sometimes are longer than in English. So he was finding it hard to keep up, and it was really interesting working with him to see how he could make sure to time things so that when the actor in the play had a punchline or at the end of a kind of a line that needed a reaction, that he would time it so he would give the audience in their earpieces the same reaction at the same time. But so it's great working with people like that to make that work. But mostly people have a very similar reaction. We kind of wondered sometimes, we've done a lot of plays that are set around here, like, we're based in Dublin. We're in Dublin 1 ourselves. We tour nationally and internationally, but we are often drawn to plays that are about Dublin and set in Dublin. So we've done that play by Sebastian Barry I mentioned earlier,
Yes.
more recently on Blueberry Hill. There's a play set in Mountjoy Prison. We did that in Mountjoy Prison itself for the prisoners. We did it in last year before the pandemic. We were on the West End transferring to Trafalgar Theatre. We've done it in New York off Broadway, and Paris in the Irish Cultural Centre, and various places as well as all around Ireland. But we were in New York, and we worried, would people understand it? Would they kind of get it? Similarly with his other play, The Pride of Parnell Street, or with some of Pat Kinnavan's plays. There's a play by Sean McLaughlin called Noah and the Tower Flower that, again, is about two people in Ballymun. We did it in Axis in Ballymun, and then we brought it to New York. And there was a guy sitting beside me one night, I remember, and I was taking notes. It was a preview or whatever, and he said, are you a critic? And I said, no, I'm the director. I'm taking some notes. And he was going, oh, well done. I enjoyed the play, and tell the actors well done. I said, oh, thanks very much. I said, I didn't understand every word, but I sure knew those two people loved each other. And you go, well, there you go. That's what it's about, really.
Exactly,
And then he turned to me and said, I'm going home now to my gaff. And he was very proud of his new words he had learned. So people pick up the lingo. And funny, in a way, it's you can sometimes think, oh, if we made a play more universal or had less local references, maybe that would appeal to people more. But the opposite is kind of true, that people hear the local references, they hear people talking about street names or people that they just couldn't know about, but they know that it's authentic because because it is authentic. And then they use their imagination, I suppose, to just see kind of a parallel kind of place in their own experience, or they can picture the place from the description. We've done some plays by Eva O'Connor. We did a play by her called Maz and Bricks about the repeal the 8th referendum, and we did that in New York too. And it was it's kind of like a modern day Ulysses, where she's walking around, and she's looking here, like you can see Daniel O'Connell's statue there. She's looking up at all the statues of all these men on their pedestals and kind of rebelling against that. And so people don't know. They don't know who the people are that she's mentioning necessarily in New York, but they sure know kind of what it's like to be in a city full of men represented on pedestals, and then they can associate with that. So it's something that you just I suppose the more specific something is, it's that thing of the local and the universal, I suppose. The more local and specific and authentic something is, the more people actually do respond to it. We wondered. I remember one time we were doing a play in New York, and the audience found it hard to follow because the accents were quite strong. And on the second preview, we slowed it down. We thought, okay, well, look, we'll make it easier for them and we'll slow it down. And it just didn't get the same reaction at all. The rhythm was wrong. The audience didn't know we were slowing it down, but they just didn't really go for it as much. So nobody complained that night that it was too hard to follow. but people didn't really like it as much and didn't have the same experience, and we could tell. So we just went back to doing it at the right pace. And again, people had to tune in. It was a bit more hard work for them, but the response was extraordinary to it, and we kind of felt, okay, the rhythm of it can't be messed with, really. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even if there are words and turns of phrase or strong accents that take people a little while to tune into.
And you mentioned, and again, kind of ties into a lot of what you've been saying, but you are a theatre company in Dublin 1. Talk to me about how that impacts your productions and the kind of day-to-day work, and then some of the outreach that you will be doing as a theatre company in this part of Dublin.
Yeah, so I think we're very kind of proud to be in the centre of Dublin. We're up on Great Denmark Street beside the O'Reilly Theatre, part of that complex. And so I suppose it affects sometimes our choice of plays and how we engage with plays. So we work in partnership with a lot of people around the city. So we've worked with Temple Bar Cultural Trust to put on plays in Temple Bar, in Meeting House Square, sort of trails of plays around Temple Bar. We worked with St. Francis Hospice to do a play called The End of the Road by Gavin Costick, that was directed by Louise Lowe, that was kind of again a trail through Temple Bar to recreate the life of a patient in the hospice. We love kind of, we do a lot of sort of site-specific work that kind of engages with the city. We've done a lot of political plays, plays about the bank guarantee, guaranteed, bailed up by Colin Murphy,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah. A play called Haughey Gregory about the deal made between Charles Haughey and Tony Gregory. And then On Post came to us, having seen some of this work, and said, would you be interested in doing a play about 1916, about the Rising? And I initially thought, I don't know if that's quite our thing. We kind of like to do contemporary work that's really about now. And they said, well, look, we'll give you the GPO for 2 weeks over Easter for on the centenary of the Rising, if you want to do something, if you think it'll work. So we immediately said, oh yeah, we'll take it, absolutely. And it was great. It was an amazing experience doing that, And of course, we found that a play set 100 years ago, of course, is as much about now as as the past. You do plays set in the past to think about who we are now. Certainly in Colin Murphy's hands, he's a fantastic playwright and journalist who really was looking at the notion of being a sort of a nation and having sovereignty, and what it was like to create your own country. And this was in the wake, I suppose, of discussions about the Catholic Church kind of taking over the running of the country, the Troika taking over kind of after the economic collapse. This question that was in the air about what it is like to run our own country and how much were we really in charge of our own country. So I suppose there was a sense of that about it. So it felt contemporary, but then it also felt exciting to be in the GPO and Pierce outside on O'Connell Street reading the proclamation, and the audience and the actors inside the GPO listening to this was very, very special.
Yeah.
The play began with people standing for the national anthem, and of course we played God Save the King, and because this was the national anthem at the time, and people in the audience found it funny or shocking, or some sat down, some sang along. I remember President Higgins actually sang along, because I suppose he knows the Queen, and he's an ultimate diplomat and perfect, brilliant statesman. But people outside on O'Connell Street could hear us inside the GPO on the centenary of the Rising on Easter Monday singing the British national anthem. And so we had death threats and bomb scares, and we had the Gardaí in the sewers underneath the GPO checking for bombs. It caused quite a stir. So it is interesting and rewarding when you feel that theatre can actually have a power to provoke people and to kind of go to deal with some sort of taboo issues and explore stuff that maybe can't be explored in other ways, And as well as that site-specific work, I suppose, just in answer to your question, we also do a lot of work in the community-based work, I suppose. So we've done work, we do work on an ongoing basis with the Trinity Access Programme. So their programme for transition year students from families where people haven't gone to college before, sort of encouraging people in TY to think about going to third level education. So we run workshops with them. We've done quite a bit of work with Mountjoy Prison. We're talking about doing stuff with the Irish Prison Service, bringing plays in. I mentioned we brought in the play set in Mountjoy, which was amazing. We brought in Haughey Gregory, about Tony Gregory and Charlie Haughey, and had an amazing discussion afterwards with the prisoners in Mountjoy. On that day we went to Mountjoy in the morning, and then we went to Dáil Éireann and did it for the politicians in the afternoon, and it was remarkable, kind of going from one place to the other. And even like we were saying about touring around the world, like, you know, there was really no difference in the reaction, like, you know, whether you're a prisoner in Mountjoy and, you know, or a TD in Dáil Éireann, the same things are funny and moving to anyone, you know. Somebody said, oh, 2 audiences full of crooks, you know, which is maybe a bit harsh, but, you know, it was a great experience to do that. And so we love kind of engaging with people, you know, in different ways, engaging with communities, you know, kind of, and working with, you know, we work sometimes with Arts and Disability Ireland. We've done projects with writers with disabilities, which we've brought to the Kennedy Centre in Washington, DC. You know, kind of looking at ways of working in the community, but also working to try and represent a diverse range of voices, you know, and thinking about diversity in Irish theatre and who's got a voice and who doesn't have a voice, and how we can play a part as a theatre company in that kind of ongoing debate, really.
Well, this is something I really want to speak to you about, and I know the Austrian journalist Ernst Fischer once said that art must show the world is changeable and help it change. And I know from following your own work that you've recently done some work along the lines of sustainability with the ESB. And then obviously as well, you've done work with various different people, kind of along the lines of like Felicia Olusanya, the poet. Talk to me about diversity and then the role that you think that theatre can play in the conversation around diversity and in social attitudes of diversity in this country.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you think of, like, there are moments in history when art and theatre has changed the world and has changed society, you know, and that's kind of a lofty kind of aim. But I think we hope kind of in our way, in Fishamble and working in theatre, that you are grappling with the issues that we're dealing with. You're kind of helping people understand who we are and have a sense of who we are, but you're also kind of, you know, exploring ideas and thoughts and changing people's minds, and hopefully that has a knock-on effect, you know, which I think sometimes it does, you know what I mean? You can see a kind of a direct connection between something that happens in a theatre and what those people that experience it bring to the world outside and to their experiences outside. So I think that does, I think that can be the case, certainly, you know. I suppose as a theatre company dedicated to new plays, we are always thinking about whose voices we're sharing, how diverse that range of voices is, how are we reflecting the voices in the country. So, you know, there was a very strong and fantastic movement, Waking the Feminists, that started about 5 years ago, which was about kind of gender equality in Irish theatre. And so we looked at the balance of playwrights, you know, male and female, and non-binary playwrights. And we've been kind of looking at making sure there's kind of a gender balance, I suppose, and representation there. And that's been quite easy to do because, you know, there are just as many fantastic, you know, female and male playwrights in the world. I think we're kind of looking at the moment at kind of, you know, the voices of people of colour, artists of colour, migrant artists, you know, and black artists. And so I suppose, you know, as part of a way of trying to sort of explore that or see, you know, who is out there, because we kind of felt as a theatre company maybe we weren't familiar with enough people or didn't really have a sense of who might be prepared to or interested in writing plays and writing theatre, you know, from those communities. We put a call out for artists of colour to take part in a workshop with our literary manager, Gavin Costick, and with Felicia Olusanya, the poet, who performs as Feli Speaks. And it was about writing for performance, so writing for sort of poetry, spoken word, theatre kind of performance. And we had over 60 applications for the 12 places on the course. And that was a workshop funded by the Arts Council and was really like such a rewarding experience to feel that there was actually a huge appetite for it, and these people were there and they just hadn't maybe you know, felt that Fishamble was for them, or that theatre wanted to hear from them, and it was really extraordinary to kind of feel there was that level of activity, and the workshops were full of energy and commitment and imagination. You know what I mean? So we're hoping that maybe that work will develop from that, which would be absolutely fantastic. And so I suppose, and a lot of other theatre companies are doing that as well, and really looking at diversity and looking at the voices and the range of voices that they present. You know, and you mentioned, you know, sustainability and, you know, climate change. And these are huge issues for us as a country and for the world at the moment. So we're, you know, again thinking, well, how can we play our role in that kind of work? So as you say, we're working with the ESB at the moment on Tiny Plays for a Brighter Future, which was a call out for plays about those issues, about sustainability and climate change and a brighter future, literally. And we've chosen 10 plays, which we're going to launch on the website soon. And we're actually going to film and stage 3 of the Tiny Plays that are fantastic pieces of work about those issues as well, you know. And we're currently looking at ways actually of of staging and filming them in the most sustainable way possible, and what that means for theatre in general, kind of the notion of sustainability. So that's kind of that's an exciting one as well, you know, because obviously theatre depends on electricity and lighting and, you know, sets and things that, you know, and just so we're looking at what can be recycled, what can be reused, what can be borrowed, how things can be done using as little power as possible. So that's something we're dealing with at the moment.
And I think, like, it's incredible the work that's being done. I suppose my question to you is, how do you do these things from your perspective, that they're not merely tokenistic gestures, that it's something that kind of have a lasting impact, that obviously when you're making productions and people are kind of exposed to these ideas, that's fantastic, but kind of internally, how do you kind of ensure that this is something, or how can you take steps to ensure that it's something that may kind of contribute to substantial change going forward?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Yeah, absolutely, you know, and you don't want these things to be one-off things,
exactly.
You know. So I think part of that is kind of having, like, we're currently developing a new strategy in Fishamble at the moment. We're also we've been working on a diversity, inclusion, and equality policy with Francesca Lamorgia from Mother Tongues Festival. So I think part of it is having actually kind of delving into why we want to do this kind of work, what it means to us. How we're going to do it, what our goals are in the short and medium and long term, and then having a policy that we can stand over and benchmark. So we work with our board. We have an amazing board in Fishamble. So at the AGM every year, we kind of look at all our policies. We look at what our goals were. We see how we've done, where we're going right, where we're going wrong, where we could do better. So it's kind of embedded in things at a kind of in a structural and at a board and governance kind of level. And there's huge work, and when we're a registered charity, so there's huge work in terms of corporate governance that we're engaged in all the time, you know. So I think part of it is that the formality of that, and then part of it is and from that, or maybe hand in hand with that, comes just the artistic impetus and the creative desire to actually explore these issues, which we have. And I think part of it is doing it in order to make it happen. People say, you know, see it to be it. You know, we felt in terms of our gender equality policy, I suppose we felt, well, if there aren't as many women artists applying for initiatives that we're running, what can we do about that? So we realised we one scheme, for instance, called Show in a Bag, which was for actors and performers to create their own work and be able to tour it in a bag, you know, with light-footed touring, I suppose, in a way. And that's created such like wonderful projects, you know, Sonia Kelly's Wheelchair on My Face that Fishamble produced and won a Fringe first and went to New York, and Swing, you know, was another fantastic play that had a big worldwide success. Emmett Kerwin's Dublin Old School that became a film, you know. Michael Patrick and Oisin Carney, their show My Left Foot became a BBC series. So lots and lots of shows have had great success. That's developed into a program called Duets for pairs of artists at the moment. But, you know, with the Irish Theatre Institute and Dublin Fringe, we were thinking, how can we make sure there's a gender equality here? So we realised we ran a workshop every year with previous participants, and we had just happened to have male participants give those workshops. We thought, well, let's have some previous female participants give the workshops. People came to it and realised, oh, here are women who've done this before. This is actually for me. You know what I mean? Perhaps people hadn't felt that before. So I think there's a lot to, like, once you put something in place and make it happen, then a lot kind of then that generates its own momentum and its own interest. You know, and I think that. Like it's interesting. Like, you know, we now have, you know, artists of color coming to us, knowing that we actually are welcoming, plays from them that maybe they hadn't realised before. We've people, you know, so that's a good sort of virtuous circle, I suppose. You know, that has good repercussions. It's a really good chain reaction. You were saying earlier about not repeating ourselves, and that's also a thing. Like in other ways, people sometimes come to us and say, you know, oh, you're the company that does tiny plays, or you're the company that does, you know, plays about homeless people or whatever. When we have a play that does a specific thing, and we kind of go, oh no, we like to move on. We like to not get stuck in a rut. But when it's a positive thing, like kind of encouraging people from underrepresented communities to see that we are open for business and really looking to talk to them and get into a discussion with them, that's a really positive thing. That those opportunities then lead to other knock-on effects. Definitely.
And I think from an audience perspective, like, I have distinct memories of my own being in the Abbey at dancing at Lunacy, for example. And I think that from my generation, that's a production, it's very well renowned, and it was excellent by all accounts.
Yeah.
But there's something different in going to a production like that and then having seen clips of Pat Kinnavan and Silent. And I think it resonates a lot with us that, like, this is a story that has a profound impact on who we are and what we're living through and the circumstances that we're living through. And I think that can be a really powerful thing, and it certainly has had a very powerful effect on me. So do you think that like the younger generation, that there will be more of an openness to kind of the tackling of these issues, that these kind of heavy, relevant, topical issues? Do you see a difference in kind of a younger generation, that they'd be more kind of, I suppose, more interested in being exposed, and kind of more interested in kind of these types of genres, shall we say?
Yeah, absolutely. I think both younger people as artists and younger people as audience members are both really, daring and adventurous and well able to, tackle the complexities of darker issues. Certainly, in terms of like we're working at the moment, there's a young curators program that are working with the NASC, which is a touring network of venues around the country, and they're putting together a program of work for Brightening Air Festival that the Arts Council is running over the summer. And so the young people kind of have decided to program Silent, the filmed version of Silent, as part of that program. It'll be the 10th anniversary of Silent. It'll be streamed in places like on Green On in Letterkenny, and in Dunamaze in Portleat, and then it'll go straight to Los Angeles, New York, London, Paris, Edinburgh, Australia. So it's going to have a kind of an international kind of life, but also an Irish life, and that's been curated by young people who've kind of chosen that work. So it's really, that's really really heartening to see that that those young curators are really are choosing that kind of work, and we find that young audiences, like we do a lot of work with with youth groups and young audiences coming to plays, and we would often we have a program of workshops and discussions kind of around the work, so that the work can engage as meaningfully as possible with audiences. And we would do a lot of workshops with youth groups and young people kind of before or after seeing performances, and they really engage. I mean, the darker the better. Do you know what I mean? They really engage with that. And I think artists similarly, our artists are fantastic, brave people who aren't afraid to face the darkness, really. You know what I mean? And put their heart on the line. And that's as true of artists of any age, really. A while back we kind of felt we wanted to kind of, when the economic crash happened in 2008, we thought, well, we're a theatre company, let's do a state of the nation play, let's do a play that captures what we're living through. And we didn't really get anything. We approached a few writers, and we talked to people like established writers and emerging writers, and people felt they were kind of in the middle of the things, and they needed a bit more hindsight perhaps, and they didn't feel that they had a play in them at that particular time. So we spread the task out, and we had a project called Tiny Plays for Ireland, and we asked people to submit 600-word plays to us, little 4-minute glimpses of life, really. And we got over 1,700 people send us these tiny plays. So we felt, okay, people really want to express themselves. They're using theatre to do it. This is quite exciting. We felt very privileged to see this snapshot of what was on people's minds. And we put together a few productions of tiny plays for Ireland at the time. And they went together as not connected to each other, and yet when you saw 25 over the course of an evening in 100 minutes, you hopefully got a sense of what was on people's minds in contemporary Ireland, like a kind of a patchwork quilt or a mosaic of plays. And that led to a few of those tiny plays, one by Colin Murphy, one by Deirdre Kinahan, led to commissions for further work by those writers. But we kind of revisited the idea then a few years later. We thought, well, let's go back and see, can we get a big play? So let's do a play for Ireland. Let's have one big play. And we invited submissions from people. And we had lots of young playwrights and young theatre artists submit ideas, and going fascinating, dark, complex, hilarious, provocative work. It was really heartwarming to sort of see what came out of it. So, I mean, the play we chose was by Oisin Carney and Michael Patrick, called The Alternative, set in an alternative Ireland that imagined in 1914 we got home rule. So we'd never got our independence, we remained part of Britain. So very like Scotland, really, that Ireland was still part of the UK now, with our own devolved government having a referendum like Scotland might have, whether to stay as part of the UK or not. So it was kind of a leave and remain campaign, I suppose, similar to lots of echoes of Brexit in it as well, but very, very funny and provocative, imagining an alternative, different Ireland. And those writers from the north, we toured it all around the country in partnership with 6 venues, with Pavilion and Drake here in Dublin, and then with the Everyman in Cork, and the Bell Table in Limerick, and the Town Hall in Theatre in Galway. And then we went to the Lyric in Belfast, and it was electric in Belfast, a play about the Republic of Ireland and the whole of Ireland remaining as part of Britain, and a referendum in BBC Dublin, a referendum live debate the night before the vote, was extraordinary. And another play that came out of that Play for Ireland process by Katrina Daly, called Duck Duck Goose, extraordinary, powerful, visceral, fascinating, thrilling play about a sexual assault, and not about the victim or the perpetrator, but about the people on the fringes, about the people kind of whose friends are accused of something and what they do and the choices they make. And we're going to do that actually sort of later this year. So that some really great work by young writers has come out of that, which is really great to see, you know.
Absolutely. And you mentioned Tiny Plays, and I know that's an issue that's been very successful. Talk to me about the development of that and then kind of where it's at now.
Yeah, so the first time around we did it, I suppose we put out a call for submissions and we got all these plays, and we chose 50 of them, and we did them in over two years, 25 plays in each year, 2011 and 12, I think it was. We brought them to New York, to the Irish Arts Centre, and to the Kennedy Centre in Washington, D.C. as part of the Ireland 100 season of work to mark the centenary of the Rising in 2016. And then we've revisited them a little bit, you know. So you know, we kind of don't want to get into a rut of doing tiny plays all the time, and yet sometimes it just seems like the model to really explore something. So when the lockdown happened at the beginning of 2020, we, as an exercise, we asked people to sort of, if they wanted to be creative and to use theatre in a creative way, to think about writing tiny plays. You know, during lockdown, about life in lockdown, and we gave people a prompt word every week, you know, like essential. You know, a lot of talk about what was essential travel, what was essential work, you know, how essential are you, how unessential are you. So we asked people to think about words like that and to write tiny plays, and we had hundreds of submissions of plays, and we printed them and shared them on our website, on fishamble.com, and had a really great response. And then we had such a positive response from that, and when we realised that the lockdown was going to continue for a while, we thought, well, let's actually stage some of these and share them online. So we ended up with a project called Tiny Plays 24/7, which had some amazing plays about that period and capturing that period in it. Plays shot on Zoom, plays shot on iPhones, plays shot in theatres with social distancing. You know, so a range of kind of plays shot with drone footage that Jeddah Debris and Cal Debris did. So like lots of different ways of trying to kind of create theatre kind of about that time. And then we've revisited it on the Tiny Plays for a Brighter Future project as well, as a way of, you know, kind of, rather than commissioning one big play, looking at glimpses of what a brighter future or sustainability and climate change means to people. So it's a kind of model we've revisited a few times, even though we've also kind of moved on and looked at, you know, we love the sort of, I suppose, the variety of scales as well. You know, we can do something, tiny plays and huge plays, and making sure that there's a scale of, you know, of work that tours extensively, but big ambitious work that can have, like inside the GPO, at a cast of 18. We did a collaboration with Cush Came and Crash Ensemble and Galway International Arts Festival that had a huge cast of performers, musicians and dancers and actors. The Alternative had 8 people in it. You know, we want to kind of do kind of big, large scale work as well as beautiful chamber pieces of, you know, 1 and 2 handers that can maybe tour very extensively. And
I think it's probably a good point to discuss then the kind of the COVID impact and kind of opening up into a post-COVID world as we are now. Thankfully, I think it's become very clear that the adaptability of Fishamble and it's kind of not being boxed into one thing is probably something that's helped. Talk to me, I suppose, initially about then the challenges that were put in your place, how you overcame them, and then your plans as things open back up and what you hope for.
Yeah, sure. But like everyone, you know, it came out of the blue. We were kind of, you know, we were running on the West End with on Blueberry Hill by Sebastian Barry at the time. You know, it had a great opening night. We thought we were on for a wonderful long run, and then the whole thing hit and everything stopped, as it did for everyone. We were in the middle of lots of tours with, you know, Eva O'Connor's play Mustard, with Pat Kinnaman's work, all had to be postponed, of course. And I think, you know, there's an amazing team in Fishamble. The general manager, Eva Scanlon, literary manager Gavin Kostick, Ronan Carey's our office and production coordinator, and Chandrika Narayan and Mohan is our marketing and development manager. And so it's a small little team of 5 people, but we kind of got together and thought, okay, how can we use our structure and our I suppose our network of partners and our position as a kind of a new play company to continue employing artists and to make work happen and continue connecting with audiences, despite the fact that theatres are shut and that we can't tour or move around anywhere. And so we looked at a number of different ways. We kind of pivoted, I think, you know, fairly quickly with the support of the Arts Council and with support from government, which, you know, there's, I suppose, traditionally kind of, theatre and the arts in Ireland have been very underfunded, even though culture and art are so much at the centre of how we promote the country, how we sell the country, how people get to know Irish people and Ireland through our music and literature and theatre and dance and all the other, visual arts. There's been we're right at the bottom of the table in terms of the percentage of GDP spent on the arts compared to other European countries. And that has been sort of very frustrating kind of for years and years. And I think the government in the past year has actually shown themselves to be great supporters of the arts through the pandemic and increased funding, and really try to make sure, like they have with many industries, that the industry survives these difficult times, which has been really great. And so with that support, we were able to pivot fairly successfully, I think, putting a lot of work online. The Tiny Place 24/7 was an online project. We run a lot of workshops and courses and initiatives for artists and to develop new plays, and they all went online. We actually found, in a way, that it allowed people to participate from any part of the country, that regardless of geography or regardless of physical ability or disability, people from anywhere, could partake in the courses. So it increased accessibility to the workshops and courses we did. So which I think is something we're going to think about, continuing in some way, as well, when we hopefully get back to doing things more live and in the same room with people. But we were able to kind of move into that territory, I suppose, and we planned to do a production of Embargo by Deirdre Kinahan with Irish Rail and Dublin Port, which was site-specific about the arms embargo 100 years ago. A fantastic story about the railway workers and the dockers refusing to handle British weapons or transport British soldiers. And then the restrictions changed back in October. We suddenly couldn't have an audience, so we filmed that with a company called Media Coop, and we shared that online with Dublin Port and Irish Rail. And we, so we constantly kind of we're changing. There were plan A, B, C, and D, like there was for everyone working in the arts and in lots of industries, kind of changing all the time, pivoting. And I suppose the fact that we had such a big network of partners, both arts and non-arts partners, both here in Ireland and internationally, built up over the past few decades, really stood to us, that people were so keen to work with us and make things happen and help us reach their audiences. And some of our productions online reached greater audiences and surpassed our box office targets, if we'd actually been doing it live, So in some ways there were some pluses from it, and some silver linings to the huge cloud of COVID, And certainly in terms of accessibility and in terms of reaching audiences kind of, across geographical areas that we might not have reached before, I think we will try and keep some elements of that going in the future. But it is certainly heartening to see that we're starting to, that we're now allowed rehearse and actually work in art spaces, and that we're looking to, in June at opening up theatre spaces. We're hoping to, throughout the next few months, to be streaming work, to be doing work for socially distanced small audiences that will also be live streamed, and hopefully then sort of going into the autumn, into kind of the festival period, that we'll actually be kind of, that we'll be live. Probably for a while, we're imagining it will be to socially distanced audiences in some way, and that we will also stream the work so we can sort of, share it with bigger audiences until we kind of get back fully to kind of hopefully where we were before,
It's very encouraging. And Jim, I want to take this time to say thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, very informative. And
thank you so much, Jack. You're very welcome. A pleasure. Thank you.
All the best.